Pork Australia's retail brand ad campaign encouraging consumers to get some pork on their fork is reaping top rewards for the nation's producers. The Peak Industry Organisation's CEO, Andrew Spencer, has told the Digital Farm the television, radio, online and point-of-sale campaign, which openly encourages mass porking, was returning $2 to producers for every industry dollar invested. Here's Andrew Spencer.
We have been running a significant TV and radio advertising campaign since around February 2010. So the awareness that we're measuring of that campaign amongst consumers is increasing, and so is our market share. So that's working. We calculate that according to what we're spending and what the industry's benefiting from it, across the whole gamut of different marketing activities that we're doing, that we're returning about $2 for every $1 we're investing back to the industry. So those sort of figures don't look too bad at the moment. In the end, it has to be measured on the impact it makes to a producer. So we know that producer's paying levies, and if you measure a dollar he pays out, he has to get something greater than a dollar back in returns on his farm. So it's got to be measured back to a point of profitability for him. So that's the point, the two numbers that we're looking at. And of course you do that through some modelling, through understanding the volumes going out in the market, through understanding the impact that our advertising has on demand and price levels. So it's pretty complicated, but we can do it, and the model seems to be working quite well.
Oh, hello.
Can't believe her.
Oh, she's just moved in, she's being neighbourly.
You know, she poked him.
Really?
She poked the whole neighbourhood.
At the same time, we run a campaign called the Pork Mark campaign. That's where we're licensing out the pink square logo, which says Australian pork, to pork processors, people who sell bacon and ham that's made from guaranteed Australian pigs. We had to do that because the labelling laws in Australia still allow things like made in Australia to be a label claim on a packet of bacon that has been manufactured from meat coming from Denmark. So we've got something like 350 licensees to that campaign now, including some of the processors who actually use a combination of imported meat and local meat. So that's a pretty good number. We can also measure in terms of the total volume of processed product out there that has the pork mark. Of course, when you consider that somewhere between 70 and 80% of all bacon and ham consumed in Australia is coming from overseas, it's still a relatively small proportion of the total market. But we are getting good take-up, we are getting good demand from processors to license up to that program, and that's probably the acid test of whether it's working or not. We've had some difficult discussions with people like Coles around their sow stalls standards, because a couple of years ago, or the middle of last year I believe it was, they made a commitment of their own around sow stalls, saying that by 2014 their fresh pork would come from systems that did not use stalls. So of course we said, well, you would have to change that and make it all of your products that contain pig meat, such as your bacon and ham. And eventually they saw the logic of that, and they came on board with that. And I think Coles is now one of the reasons that we're seeing a very slight decrease in the amount of imports. They're supporting us to a point where they're probably selling more Australian product on their shelves today than they were this time last year. So that's a really great turnaround. Woolworths, of course, too, whilst they're not very public about it, do have their own standards around the use of stalls. And the big supermarkets, Coles in particular, have been making decisions around this sort of private standards area quite freely over the last 12 to 18 months. And we are in continual discussion with them about what that means. I mean, it's their decision to make these, it's their right to be able to make these decisions. But we want to make sure that they understand what the connotations are in terms of animal welfare, in terms of productivity, in terms of impact on the environment, etc. So we continue to have that dialogue, and I hope that they're appreciating the information that we put in front of them so that they can make better decisions too. We are quite familiar with what goes on in the UK. We know our equivalent body in the UK pig business. There's a few things that are quite different about the UK though, you've got to remember. One is that they don't have the supermarket duopoly. So they have a much more competitive supermarket sector with a number of big players, quite a number. The other thing is that they have no restrictions on fresh pork imports coming in from mainland Europe. The UK industry took some very clear and decisive steps away from sow stalls, for example, back in 1999. That's when they first banned them. But since that happened, their industry is about half as big as it was, because all that happened was that they added cost to their own production and they weakened themselves so that all of these imports came in from across the channel. So that's not what we want to see happen here. I don't believe that their market was ready for that move. I think they made it too early, and they've now suffered from that a lot. Of course, the result is now that the UK has one of the largest outdoor herds in Europe, so that they can now make this offering, which is seen as a higher welfare standard, which is appealing to those who go to the Tesco's and the Waitrose, those higher level retailers who have set the global standards around having their own private standards and demanding that I will go above and beyond what the regulations require.
Next week, Australian Pork CEO Andrew Spencer shares with the Digital Farm fresh new animal welfare initiatives, which he says places Australia at the forefront on the industry globally. Stay tuned.